All right, what's everybody? What's up, everybody? We are here back on my YouTube channel. We are here with Mike from Long on Cards on Instagram. So what I'm gonna try to be bringing to you guys is a series of episodes, more like debate discussion style content, to kind of give you guys a little different look on what we are doing, or some of the topics that some people might not really touch. These are topics that really interest me, and I know a lot of other people. We have conversations around these things. And then I know Mike, he's definitely very knowledgeable and has a good look on the market in certain respects. So glad we could have him on, and he can give us some of his thoughts on a couple of key points. So appreciate for having you on, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Should be fun. I always like talking about this stuff.
Oh, for sure, it's super interesting. I think for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess the first thing we will discuss and kind of have a little discourse and dialogue is the thoughts are: one, as your Instagram name is Long on Cards, you have to have some belief in it being an asset class and some faith in it or whatever. So I mean, do you believe, obviously I'd assume you do believe cards are a legitimate asset class, and if so, like what makes them truly like investable, an asset class, whatever the case may that be?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to kind of approach the question. But I think, in general, I put cards and collectibles in general, right, in a grouping of kind of the tangible asset class. Separating cards from fine art or cards from coins or this and that, right? You could choose to, or you could kind of lump all that into, a tangible asset class. I think, there are some cards that are more akin to fine art, and there are, some cards that are more akin to a commodity, like you'd be buying and selling a gold coin or something like that that's worth its face value. Um, so I do think that trading cards are a component of kind of what I'd call the general tangible asset class. They're a subset of that, and within that, right, like I mentioned, there are cards that are more like a fine art, and there are cards that are more like a commodity and more liquid. So I do consider them part of that asset class, because I think, as we've seen in the past, and let's say pre-pandemic, if you're looking from like 2000 to 2019, it's an asset class that is more correlated, like trading cards themselves are more correlated with the fine art asset class than it is with stocks. So, the when the market tanked in 2008 and 9, trading cards didn't tank. It wasn't a one-to-one type of thing. So, a lot of people that invest in fine art do so because there's a lack of correlation with the stock market. And it's kind of a hedge. People throw 10% of their account into fine art. Aside from the tax evasion loopholes that the uber wealthy, use fine art for, there's a lot of people that do it just for that uncorrelated or lack of correlation with the stock market to diversify. So I think, sports cards and non-sports cards are a more fun version, a more real and more tangible version of kind of the fine art world. It is a collectible. They are things that, bring out something in us, and in most cases we buy what we like. In the fine art world, you do, if you can afford a $20 million Banksy or something like that. But you see actually a lot of fractionalization happening in the fine art space with companies like Masterworks. People that buy into a fraction of a Picasso or a fraction of some other artist they don't really know, they're doing it specifically for that hedge on stocks. They're doing it specifically. They're not doing it because they like it. They're not doing it because it brings out something, of their character, or they identify with it. They're just doing it from a monetary perspective. So, I think one of the cool things about trading cards is that when you're buying like a Steph Curry rookie card, you're doing it because you love Steph Curry and you think he has potential and to keep growing from where he's at right now, and et cetera, et cetera. So that I do think it's coming back to the question. I think it's part of the tangible asset class, but trading cards definitely, I wouldn't say they're their own standalone asset class.
So I guess I want to clarify a little. So for instance, like what sort of card would you classify as something more art related, as opposed to like what would be more commoditized? 'Cause I have my idea, but I want to hear what I guess
Yeah.
what you meant by that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of those terms are kind of used to separate between items that are kind of the base of what's transacted versus the kind of, I don't want to use the word grail because that's so subjective, but like the the low production, extremely difficult to obtain in terms of either finding it or being able to afford it. It could be both. It could be one or the other. Um, and so when I think fine art, I think kind of a one of a kind. Like people say like the Mona Lisa of baseball cards is the 52 mantle. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can agree with that, but the Mona Lisa, maybe from the beauty or the provenance or the well-known nature of the Mona Lisa, I think is where people make that comment from. But it's not a one of one, right? Obviously. But something like the Steph Curry '09 National Treasures out of 99, or like the '03 Exquisite LeBron out of 99, or out of 23. Those cards are, they're kind of they're fine art cards. Right? There's a piece of patch that's unique, one of one piece of patch in each one. All the patches are different. So each individual card, not only is it being a low serial number, but they're extremely hard to find. And oftentimes they're kind of unaffordable for most. So that's where I see like the fine art realm. And then on the commodity side, I just kind of use that term loosely to define cards that you can find frequently traded. They're more highly liquid, potentially lower risk on the short term. Whereas I think a lot of the rarer pieces, people look to to hold those a little bit longer term. And if you're buying the fine art pieces, oftentimes you're buying them because they mean something special to you and you want to hold on to them. Like some of the examples in my portfolio that I'd consider fine art is like the 2016 or 15-16 flawless soccer set. And like those patch autos of Messi are as fine art as it gets for Messi's brand. I mean, yeah, the Mega Cracks, his like flagship rookie card is great, but it's a commodity outside of the high grade versions. And even when you're looking at it, I mean, the difference in visual, if you're holding a 9 versus a 10, you're like, okay, yeah, it's the same card. They're not, but it's basically the same. So I see those special rare cards, and now that's kind of being commoditized in itself, right? Like with these new sets that are coming out, like it's hard for me, even though I really got into the hobby in like 2018, after quitting from when I was a kid back in, I think the last year I collected was like 2000 or 2001. I think I got reinvigorated in baseball in 2001 because Ichiro joined the Mariners and I was a big Mariners fan. So from 2001 to 2018, I wasn't collecting anything. But the difference between 2018 and today, as we all know, in terms of the number of these rare, numbered patch cards has blown up like crazy. So it's not, you can't just say a fine art card is a serialized patch card because it's not really the case anymore. So I don't know who's to say what Fanatics and these other companies do to maybe bring that spirit back to the hobby. But
Yeah, for sure. And so I guess I'll explain my thought. Here's my thought going into it. For me, when I hear commoditizing something, I think it's like stable growth, very safe.
mhm.
You could kind of nail down a price on it. So I'm thinking like a lower grade mantle, some
Mhm.
vintage stuff. To me, that sort of stuff would be like, the safer stuff. You're like year over year, you might get some return, won't drop, won't split in half, but will kind of stay steady. Whereas I feel kind of what you're saying, like, would that be like that one of one Luca logo man that's gonna be put up on auction, or like
Yeah.
I don't know, a PMG Jordan, something that doesn't, you know, again, you don't use the word grail loosely, but something that really doesn't pop up whatsoever.
Mhm.
And yet, like, you have to, if you want to get that card, you're gonna have to pay up no matter what market it is. So
Right.
I think that's definitely like a key indicator.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things it's one of those things you just kind of know when you see it. So like I won the the gold power matchups, Messi Ronaldo in an auction, and I think that card is that card is a fine art piece. I mean, they only made five of them. They never really come up for sale. Um, Nobody really knew how important that card would be at the time. Like 2014 wasn't a huge production run year. It was a World Cup set. They were trying to make something special in that set. Um, and so it's got to have that backstory of being, produced rare, like the PMG, right? Like the PMG green. It was produced rare. It was meant to be this chase card. Um, and yet a lot of energy went into making it too and designing it. So it's got to kind of have all those pieces in my mind to differentiate it to be kind of this like fine art level of a card.
Right. Um, so I know, so I guess I'll go back to like the whole it as an asset class. So I mean, obviously, like cards, I'd say fine art move very similarly, like you'd mentioned earlier, and I feel we've definitely seen a big spike in the fine art market, and with something like a Masterworks, etc., making it easier for the average folk to get into these big time pieces.
Yeah.
That's another way to boost the overall market. With letting the smaller guy play in those in the big fish pool, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, how we know throughout like market history, once everything goes up, everything what goes up does must come down. Um, do you see or foresee like you know whether some stuff's obviously going to hold better than others? I mean, I don't know. Obviously, we have certain things, certain levers that we do, whether it be like fractional or other stuff like that, that have similar um I don't know, similar implications in the card market themselves. Do you feel like that could be I don't want to say like word it too poorly, but like it's there and it'll really help you on the way up, but could really cause you to have some serious side effects on the way down
Yeah. I
in terms
think,
of like inflating prices. I don't know if I
yeah.
explained myself very well there.
Yeah. So I think one thing that is always in the back of my mind when I see, prices go up and prices go down. I mean, we saw that astronomical rise right up in 2021. The card market is incredibly fragile from a supply demand equation. If you think about some of let's call it the blue chip cards in the world, if you were to make a list of the top 10 that first come to your mind, it might be a card like the '09 Topps Chrome Curry and a PSA 10. That's a pop 63, I think, something around there. So even though we talk about that, oh, it's always coming up for sale, right? These big blue chip cards are so low numbered in terms of rarity, and yet we talk about high trade frequency as one a month is high. Oh, that card it's always up for auction. You can always buy one. Like, it's so relative to the current participant pool, and that current participant pool that is influencing pricing is extremely low in terms of volume of people. So right now, the market, I think we're seeing a decline in the market. And I think a lot of that is fueled by a base of buyers coming in, say, with like less than $5,000 of total investment, and they're pulling that $5,000 and moving it back into cash because of the financial climate. I think we saw people in 2021 overexposing themselves to risk and getting on the hype train of cards, as opposed to reasonable people with I can't include myself in that because I've spent way too much on cards myself. But if you looked at the, the reasonable or prudent investor that puts 10% into a risky asset class like cards or fine art or crypto or whatever it is, that's a good move at 10% of your portfolio value, right? But if you're putting 50, 60, 70%, that makes the buy or the sell decision in a time of fear really easy to do, just from a psychological standpoint. And so, like, when there's blood in the streets, that's when people start buying. And so I think that if you're a long-term believer in the market, now as the market is starting to go down, it's the same thing you do with stocks. You dollar cost average in on things that you feel will hold long term. It's not that big of an issue for flippers. And frankly, I think the flippers are, that whole flipper mentality is kind of a big part that has driven the market down. I think I think there were a lot of people that were eager to participate because of the quick money, as opposed to, if you look at pre 2019, not a lot of people, it was like, call it a handful of people were doing the flipping game and making really good money. There were probably a lot more people that were doing the flipping game making like nowhere near like a double digit percent of their regular job, but it was more of like just a side hustle or a side hobby. But now you have people thinking that they can make their entire living flipping cards, and that's not scalable because somebody's always got to be buying more. And so if the market's going up, sure, it's easy, but that's not always going to happen. And so the reason, I don't know, it's kind of coming back to why I'm long on cards on Instagram. I came up with that because I believe, just like when cards were back in the late 1800s and the early 1900s with the original Hall of Famers and you just go back in time, cards have always been a part of our culture. I think they always will be. I think we're starting to see more sophisticated money getting into the space. You have fanatics, you have different investment groups led by really savvy people, including athletes, getting into the space. And specifically with fanatics, that makes me very long on cards in general, because that's a company that I think they understand how easy it would be for them to screw this up. And they have put a ton of money banking on themselves not screwing it up. I mean, with all the money they're paying for the licensing, acquiring Topps, I don't know if they're acquiring Panini or if they already have. I haven't caught up on that, but there's a lot of people banking on doing the right thing with the production side of things going forward, and so that makes me bullish in the long term. But again, as the market, I think the market's going to go down another 20 or 30%, regardless of whether it's stocks or cards or what. We're not going to have a fun 2023, at least the first half. So if you aren't in cards and you have 10% to put into something that's higher risk and you enjoy it, then I think it's fun. And I think it's a good move. But yeah, I mean, the stuff that I'm reducing my collection always down to what are the cards that I absolutely love that I think are going to hold value. It's got to check both those boxes, or else I'm finding kind of the right time to move it along.
Yeah, for sure. Consolidation. I feel
Yeah.
like that's kind of the trend across the board. It's either
Yeah.
out the hobby or consolidate, which I think is another big factor of why, there's a lot of more auctions,
Yeah.
some lower end stuff, more rare stuff is selling more frequently, even more than usual, and then people are getting into bigger pieces or trading, however you want that to play that.
Right.
My question is, can you see a even greater divide? So I guess let me phrase this like in multiple ways. So for one, I'm sure, like you said, there realistically are it's a very small buyer pool at the top, buyer and seller pool at the top that really, make a lot of these prices on these high end cards, if you'd agree.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
I would definitely consider you somewhere in there, especially on the soccer front, considering you do hold some, fairly nice assets in that regard. One, do you like the the fact that realistically, compared to other markets, it's a very small percentage of money that it takes to really influence a market and like kind of an outcome? A, do you like that part very much? And then B, do you see a potential bigger divide between the prices of those type of assets compared to the average card?
Yeah, that's a
Loaded
good,
question, but
no, yeah, it's a really good question, right? You really do have, I mean, you could argue kind of both sides. You could argue there's a continuum of value from the high dollar stuff down to the really low dollar stuff. Like, pick I don't know. There's a couple. Let's kind of go at it from a couple different directions using cards, specific cards. So like we look at the 1989 Star rookie, the Upper Deck Griffey. It was a highly coveted, nostalgic card now for people my age and younger and older. Um, and the population on that card is huge in a PSA 10. I think it's like 2000 or something like that, or maybe it's, I don't know, we'd have to look it up. It's got to be more than that. And so, that card, what is it sitting at? Like $1,400 or something like that. That's a great card at $1,400. You think like what other flagship iconic card that has stood the test of time can I get for $1,400? So, I mean, that's a good example of call it the $1,000 to $2,000 range. Now, if you wanted to going higher than that is easy. You can pick any point you want, whether you want like a PSA 2 Ty Cobb, T206 for $6,000, if you want to, go up and up and up from there. But I think part of the question is like, can you get into the market in the low dollar area and still see growth? And I think it's harder. I think it's harder to get in modern rookies excluded, right? Yeah, sure. If you gamble on, the next big NBA star, or the next big soccer star at, $100 or $200 a card. Yeah, you can make money on that. Like Sports Card Investor does his top 5 videos, which I never really identify with because I'm not in it to go from a $120 card to a $180 card and I see a big percentage increase. I'm like, these videos aren't relevant to me. Not from the dollar perspective, but just because I'm not interested in like a quick flip for $60,
Yeah.
I'm more interested in buying what I love for a long period of time and enjoy holding it. And of course, fingers crossed that it's worth more when I need to sell it for kids' education or something else, or just like you were talking about consolidating up into something else. So I think it's harder to find the entry points at the lower dollar value once you started to acquire less assets at the higher dollar value, right? So, I mean, it just depends on your portfolio. Like if you have $500 to spend, do you want to get one card that's $500 or you want to get, 15 cards that are, $150 each or something, right? That math doesn't work out. Anyways, so it really depends on, I think, what makes you happy, but it's easier to see the investment pathway with kind of a higher dollar entry point. You know what I mean? That otherwise you're really rolling the dice because at low dollars, you're either buying really low grades of things or you're buying really risky rookies.
Yeah.
So
like for instance,
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, even like the LeBron Topps Chrome PSA 10, for instance. I think it's like a pop 2000 something.
Yeah.
They're around like what, 6-7 grand.
Yeah, I saw one go for 81 last night
Okay, maybe a little higher than that. But
yeah.
point being, that realistically, if you're trying to hold that long term as a scarce asset, whatever, sure, I could see it if the hobby grows, whatever, I could see it going up marginally, but I don't think you'll ever see that 2, 3, 4x return in a short amount of time like we've seen in the past, just strictly due to the
No,
population.
no, yeah.
You
I
have
would
to get
agree.
in something bigger like a black refractor, X fractor, something like that, but that costs substantially more money, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that card is that's a great card because there's parallels, because there's multiple entry points within each grade and all this. And you can always, when you're talking to somebody, and I remember hearing this rhetoric like all the time during the boom, it's like, oh, there's only, there's only 2,000 of those. And think about how many LeBron fans there are. And it's like, once you apply the filter of how many LeBron fans even think that trading cards are still a thing, there's kind of discomfort and comfort in that whole mindset, right? The comfort is that there are very few LeBron fans that actually know that trading cards are still a thing. Like, I talk to friends of mine from college, friends of mine from work, and I'm like, yeah, I bought this trading card, and they're like, trading cards, that's still a thing, even with all the buzz, even with the boom of the market and all that. None of that news has ever reached people that are in the same, population as me, upbringing as me, all that. So that's comforting to me, because I know that they would be interested if they had the right information and the guidance, if they, and if they had some sort of deep love and following of certain brands across the sports and non-sports realm. Um, who doesn't, if they're rooting for Curry, let's say, you live in the Bay Area and you love Curry, who doesn't want to have a Curry card that they think will slowly gain value over time and get that much more interested in the championship? Like, I don't know. It's easy for me to say that because that's what I do. But when I tell that to somebody else, they didn't even realize that that was a possibility. And the thing is, like, it only takes one. You buy one card and you're hooked often, if you don't get absolutely crushed or burned or you did it for the wrong reasons. But you buy a share of stock and there's no emotion tied to it all. So that emotional attachment to those purchases is something that I think could be really explosive as we've seen it play out for the growth of the hobby. But we just need part of the masses to come in. I think Masterworks, just as a kind of a interesting data point, I think Masterworks over the last something like 12 or 18 months signed up 500,000 new members. That's more people than I would argue bid in a given year, by maybe a factor of 4. Like, I mean,
It's a lot of people.
there's probably,
I have seen their advertising a lot though, however, I will say that. They
and
put a
do you know
lot
what
of into that.
their minimum investment is? It's something like 5 to 10 grand. You can't get into them for $500. So we're talking about a whole bunch of people convinced by Masterworks pitch that their investment platform gives them a uncorrelated asset to the stock market. Unfortunately, you can't really say that about cards right now, because cards are more liquid, and when you put money in Masterworks, there's almost no liquidity. So it's a different mindset when you're investing. And so the fact that it's easy to take the money out makes the card market much more volatile than the art market. Also, in the art market, you have, when an Andy Warhol painting goes up for auction, the Andy Warhol ownership community is almost working together, not necessarily in cahoots, but they know what the value of Andy Warhol paintings are, and they will scoop things up at that market value, as opposed to letting it go down 70%, like we've seen with some card values. It's not going to happen in the art world. But that's also because a lot of these really fine arts are very limited in numbers. So, it's kind of like, are people going to let the MJ 86 Fleer go down? Like, we've seen it obviously hit this crazy peak, but how long over this year, how long has it been riding at like 150 grand, 170 grand? It's been riding that for a long period of time. So, I don't know. I think there's a lack of sophistication, and I think sophistication's coming. I think there's a lack of a solid base of people that have 10% discretionary money to put in, as opposed to people that are spending more than they should. And the moment that starts to happen, I think that's going to be what's necessary to get the market to come back up and stabilize. Because you probably heard it just like I have on all these different podcasts, and we don't want a market that 10x's in 10 months. Like, nobody wants that, because it's going to happen.
For sure. So I'll push back like on a couple things. So one, obviously what we're saying is we're kind of a lot of the market's reliant on a lot of liquidity in the system, money in people's pockets. Because at the
Yeah,
end of the day, it's not like real estate where it actually serves a purpose. Like you can live in the house or you can rent out the house and it'll pay you,
right.
either get dividends or whatever the case may be. It's kind of just there. So there's
Hmm.
that. So you need people with extra money that are like, you know what, I'll grab this, I'll just sit on my wall if it's a painting, and my say, however, whatever you want to do with that.
Yeah.
And then the like using Masterworks as an example, that's a very interesting point, and I kind of brings me on to the next thing. It's like the commoditization of cards and like the increased usage of financial instruments to, like, if you want to call it sophisticate the market. I would assume based on what you said, we would see something like that in our future. Like we have the fractional, we have there's certain companies that you could borrow against your cards, get cash advances,
Hmm.
stuff like that. Do you see that? Well, a couple things. One, do we see more of that in the future? Do we see that as a positive and negative? There's obviously both pros and cons with both. I would
Yeah.
definitely want to hear your take on that.
Yeah. So speaking about the fractionalized first, I think that fractionalization in the card market started out basically on high dollar rare cards. And it was thought that, okay, we're going to go through all the effort to securitize a given card, right? We're going to follow the rally road, whoever paved, I don't know who blazed the trail, collectible or rally. I think rally was before collectible. But anyways, this whole securitization of an asset such that that asset is the entire company, and therefore you can break it up into shares and whatever, right? That's the current available fractionalization pathway. That is extremely challenging to do at scale. So, what is collectible? What do? They drop one card every 3 months, and I don't even know if I've seen a card recently hit. I don't even bother looking at that because it's not interesting to me. Um, but I don't think I think there are areas of friction with that. The identification, registration, and the giving your social security number, and the what are the tax implications and all. I think that bar blocks a lot of people because not only do they not know what they're getting into if they're new to it, they don't know what a Bill Russell card should be worth and what it will be worth later on, and this and that. Um, or like a Will Chamberlain jersey. Like, how do there's the valuation that you're buying at the IPO level, and then who knows what it's going to be, as opposed to like a Pablo Picasso that you're buying a fraction of, that the last 8 different Pablo Picassos all sold for more than 10 million a piece, and the average one has done 10% RO, year over year growth, et cetera. So it's easier for somebody to do the fractionalized art than it is some fractionalized jersey. Also, a fractionalized card that there's other ones of. It's not like a fractionalized one of one like the paintings are. It's a fractionalized, you know, mass produced or micro produced card. So I think the fractional space for cards will die, with respect to the current version of fractionalization. Now, if somebody can figure out a new way so that every other person can fractionalize something, maybe there's some potential there. But the fractionalization or securitization of a card, we've seen it. Collectible doesn't do well, I don't think. I mean, it's not. I don't think they have that kind of participation, and I don't think they will in the future either, because you can only. I get it that it provides an entry point for somebody. For $50, you can put it into a LeBron RPA, and you can own a piece of that and ride it out for however long you want. I get that, but that serves the LeBron fans. Like the investor base of cards is broader than that. And when you only have a limited number of things to pick from, then it can be discouraging. Also, a lot of people like to, cards are meant to be held. Like there's that whole thing, and that I'd say the mass majority of the hobby just completely tunes out fractional because they're used to being able to own the cards. They have cards in their portfolio already, and so they're not interested in that. And if they were, allow them to be interested in that is if all of their particular interests were available on a marketplace that was sophisticated, as opposed to this kind of one-off fractionalization of each asset. It would have to be some sort of.
Cool. So let me ask you this: in the future, it's like one of the reasons I think Masterworks works so well is a lot of people don't want to be bothered with the hassle of like actually purchasing the item, selling the item, dealing with
Yeah, totally.
they don't feel they might just not feel qualified to do something like that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like more so of like an index for sports cards is going to become more prominent in the future, where that be like a fund, like a version like the S&P or the Dow or something
Yeah.
along those lines? That could be like a prominent feature.
Yeah, I've always thought that, like, I heard early on when alt was coming up that they kind of started as a private fund
I've seen something
management
about that.
company or something. I'm not exactly sure how that evolved or changed, or if it's still something that's going on. But I always thought that that was a really, really interesting angle on the sports card realm. So Masterworks has a fund as well, where you can just dump money into it and you get paid dividends on the fund, because there are 300 something paintings in the fund, and so they're constantly selling things off, and they're making small amounts of money along the way, and they diversify that out to the owners of the fund. So I could see that going really well. In fact, like, I'm sure you have met, even more than I have, people that could put together a card fund and manage that and deal it and work. You could put together a portfolio of incredible cards that are, a portfolio that is well managed between short-term risk, long-term risk, um, high dollar cards, low dollar cards. You could, just like you could set up your own personal portfolio, you could set it up to, have X, Y, and Z risk profile. It's not going to be a fund of all Lionel Messi cards or all this. It's going to be diversified, and you get people to buy in. And I really see that I'm hopeful that that somehow will come to be
For
for
sure.
the masses, like Masterworks has done.
For sure. What do you also, because we're talking about, I guess, the financial levers you can pull. What are your thoughts on the lending aspect on cards, especially in times of, I guess, economic distress that we're currently in?
Yeah, I think it's great that it's an offering. I think, the people that have, I think there is, where my mind goes, there's kind of like the birthplace of lending is almost the cash advance for the dealers. So like people that are moving a lot of cards with a fair amount of money need advances on their cards so they can keep that engine going. And those are the people doing this full time, right? They need advances from the auction house, et cetera. So that's kind of like the first step of the lending arm of an auction house. But now getting into lending on cards that are stored in a vault, those kind of things, right? That's now, a number of companies are doing that. And I think that's a really good thing for the market, because it allows people flexibility, financial flexibility on cards that they don't ever want to see go out of their portfolio. But if they have some other financial play they need to make, a real estate deal or this deal or that deal, they can still facilitate that without losing their grail card that they work so hard to achieve. So I think it's a necessary part. And just like anything, you have to have liquidity, and you have to have financial flexibility for any asset class to have a shot at really growing.
Yeah. So my one thing with something like that, and like for instance, I've heard stories about people that have had loans, because I guess you could extend your loan for however long, depending on if you want to pay it back or not. They've had loans out for multiple years on assets. Again, not exactly sure in everyone's case what they're doing with the money, this and that.
Mhm.
Obviously, now interest rates have hiked a significant amount. Looks like they'll be continuing to hike, which means uh, I don't partake in myself, so I don't have personal experience, but I would assume there'd have to be some sort of adjustment with something like that. Obviously, um, we've seen declines in certain assets as well.
Mhm.
And a lot of that has to do with the frequency of how frequent items are selling, which, just puts more sell pressure on the market.
Yeah.
There's situate like, do you foresee, or not foresee, but could this be there's always a possibility of, like, it's almost like not a bank run, but something of the sorts, where there could be credit issues in the terms of a big a big creditor, or or not, a big debitor cannot pay back their commitments. They hold a lot of assets, sell, and it's almost like a tsunami effect, whereas stuff has to move on auction,
Yeah.
bad comps, whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Obviously, like anything else, that's one of the risks, I suppose, of uh, any financial market, really. That's what we've seen. We've
Yeah.
seen crypto got hit massively, similar aspects. I don't know. I'm not super into this. I've only heard stories. I don't know if you have any opinions on something like that.
Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. I actually haven't really thought about the risk side of the lending. Obviously the auction houses out there have to figure out what percentage they can lend, half, 40%, 30, whatever the percentage of the fair market value of the card. But yeah, if the card is declining and the whoever took the loan out, the owner of the card isn't intending to pay it back, and they're trying to doing work one over on the auction house and take advantage of a system, ultimately losing money, I would imagine, in the process. But in doing that, yeah, then the auction house would have to liquidate the assets in order to make good on the amount that was loaned out. And so you could imagine if a bunch of people did that, or a handful of people with huge amounts of really big cards, important cards for the hobby, that yeah, it could flood the market with those sales. I mean, imagine the auction houses would be smart and not just all of a sudden dump just tons and tons of cards all at once. Um, but yeah, like coming back to that first statement I made about the market, it's like it's such a fragile market that you see two Topps Chrome LeBron refractors in the same auction, and it's like, oh my gosh, the world is collapsing. uh and we're starting to see that more and more. And it's, I'd say the silver lining of all this is, if you're seeing cards getting bought like that, those kind of caliber cards, there's two things that can happen, right? Whenever these cards get bought, either they're being bought because they think the buyer thinks there's a short-term opportunity there, and maybe we'll see that same card auction 4 months later and they make 5% or something on it. Or these cards, even like the LeBron base, for $8,000, the hope is that these cards are finding their way into hands that cherish the card, that want to hold the card long term, and that aren't looking and getting into it with money such that they don't have to panic if that card goes from 8,000 to 7,000 and then they panic sell.
That's the key.
Because we're seeing so much panic selling right now. I've panic sold. I've totally panic sold. In 2019, I panic sold I panic sold like a Jackie Robinson for $5,000 that's now worth like 40. Like, I panic sold a bunch of stuff. We all have. But if you get into it with, it's like any financial investment, and it's so hard to hold yourself to this. You have to get into any move financially with a plan and stick to the plan. So, had I bought a refractor, a Topps Chrome LeBron refractor for 50,000, something like that, 52, and it went up in 4 months, 5 months, it went up to 250. And had I had a plan that said, hey, if this card goes up by 40%, I should sell, or whatever, because I kind of wanted the card for a long-term plan or long-term hold. But you have to make plans for yourself. And so if you're going to buy a LeBron base right now for $8,000, your plan is not going to be sell it, if it goes down to 7,000. But people are doing that. Probably somebody today bought the card And if the Lakers continue, I mean, they won their first game or their first game last night or whatever. But if they continue to suck, and yeah, LeBron breaks his all-time point record, but at the end of the season, people are hating on him, and the card's worth $6,000 because the economy has also slipped. Is your plan going to be to sell it and take a $2,000 loss? No. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's, you got to have a plan, and I think a lot of the people that are getting into it now don't have that kind of financial discipline, and they don't really think about those kind of things. And I'm generalizing, but I think a lot of the new entrants to the market are younger people.
A lot of people are, like you said, they're in for the flip, they're for the quick buck.
Yeah.
That's great in terms of trying to make money, short term, and I guess that's basically essentially like day trading. But
Yeah.
I think, in this market, and I've said it multiple times on like my Instagram lives and all that, this would be a great market for a buyer who has a plan and is long on cards to really scoop up nice stuff
Yeah.
and, set that up for, the long term. Because
Yeah.
what if you notice, like 2020, 2021, the best premium assets were not selling really. Now
Mhm.
you might see them, they come up all the time, but it's
Yeah.
just people are panicking. So when people panic, you buy.
Yep.
But two
And
more quick, yeah.
it's totally what, human psychology just tells you not to do that. Like, you just follow the herd. And as people are selling, you feel like you should sell or you should not buy. And really that's the time to buy. But, in this market right now, should you buy cards or should you buy stock? And if someone asked me that question, I would say go buy 80% stock and go buy 20% cards. Like, and only if you're going to have fun with the cards, because that's part of it. Like, if you're just in it for making money, then you can't really beat the traditional forms of investment from a liquidity standpoint and averaging out over time. We've seen the card market do some really funky things over the last couple of years. Who knows what the future looks like? I think it's bright because of the new ownership and sophistication that's coming in, and the fact that it's such a fragile market, being that there are so few participants that it doesn't take that much, as we've seen in the past. It doesn't take that much added participant or added finance, or both really, to splash the pot and make the needle move. But with the stock market, you are as a retail investor, you are the ant that gets squashed. You can still make good long-term plays in mutual funds and that kind of stuff, but you're not Wall Street. When you're buying cards, you are Wall Street. You're on the same level playing field as everybody else. It's not like Wall Street has access to cards and ways to buy cards that you don't. It's just how much money can you buy, or how many cards can you buy, or
Like
what can
50
you afford.
grand could get you a long way in cards, whereas in the stock market, it's a drop in the bucket, if that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask you a side question, because I've posed this to a lot of my friends and I hear what they have to say. Um, let's just say you had 300K to go spend on, like, I don't know, like a Messi 71 biz PSA 10, or that same amount of, or however much the Messi is, it's around that number,
Yeah.
or 300K into the S&P. 10 years lockout period, can't touch it. What do you think would
Ooh.
you put your money into? What do you think would give you a better return after that 10-year period?
I mean, I know what the smart play would be S&P. Just because historically what it's done and where we're at right
Historically
now.
average, I'll give you, it'd be like it's
Like
like,
10%.
assuming it'd be through 300 now, it'd be like 370. So it'd be like
over 10
670, I believe.
over 10 years. Is that only a 10% each? Well,
I
10,
believe the average is like
it's
8
like,
or 10 or something like that.
well, if it was 10, you'd make 30 grand in the first year. So it can't be
I
370.
can
It would also compound. So
No,
if
670. So it'd be like it would,
670.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It 370 would be the gain.
Yeah. I mean, I think the answer nine out of 10 times is the stock market. Let's say your portfolio, your whole net worth is $6 million. That's a different story. So I hate to give you the,
No, you don't have, no, hey, I'm just asking the questions here.
so it's all relative to how much money you have and where that money's currently deployed and what gives you joy. Like, I have that Messi PSA 10. I bought mine for 20 grand. And, you know, a financial advisor could be like, hey, you should sell that and take the gains and move it into something else. But two factors for me. One, I love the card. I think it's incredibly important for the entire soccer market. Two, I think the soccer market is in its infancy. And I think relative, when you compare its market cap to other sports and its potential when the World Cup comes here, I think there's just huge potential for the soccer market. And Messi is, when he retires and all that, the future of Messi and his legacy is, even though he's not the most public guy, which does hurt his brand a little bit. Nobody wants to see Frito-Lay Messi ads for the rest of his life, but that might be what happens, him just eating chips and getting fat and old. But hopefully that's not the case. And people just, you know, fawn over his amazing goal scoring highlight videos on YouTube, which I'm guilty of as well. So I'm bullish on Messi in the long term. So I'd hold the card. I could sell it, make a profit today, but I don't want to. I don't want to move that money into something else. I think that card could be worth 600 grand in 5 or 10 years. Who knows?
Okay.
It's worth the gamble. It's a gamble. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll admit it. Like, it's a total gamble for me to keep holding that card.
That's fair. Interesting. Okay, I like the analysis. Interesting. Two final questions. I mean, we could go a little, give an answer. We don't have to dive too deep into them. Obviously, there's a lot of consolidation lately in terms of collections, cards, but also like companies. So obviously, we see Fanatics, they're buying up Tops, they're buying up all this other stuff. We're seeing
Yeah.
shops expand across the country, different
Yeah.
locations. You just kind of just partnerships, this and that. You kind of just overall see a consolidation of business towards the
Yeah.
top of the food chain. What are your thoughts on, you kind of mentioned them a little bit, but negative, positive for the hobby, uh, monopoly question mark? I don't know. You could look at it a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I think, you know, consolidation, right? If you're asking me, why am I consolidating, always looking for a way to consolidate my card collection? And it's not necessarily always looking to, but when I make a decision to consolidate, I feel like I'm doing a smart thing. I feel like I'm taking assets, I'm, you know, combining them into an asset that I like more than all the others. Like, I recently bought, I recently bought a card, and that card I was holding in this hand, and I was holding the 6 other cards that I was selling to get it. And I'm like, I like this card 3 times more than all of these other cards that I used to love in this hand. And that's kind of what it's all about from the emotional side of things on the card world. But if you look at that decision from a business standpoint, from a financial standpoint, I'm putting more faith that this single card is going to do better than this, you know, this grouping of cards. So when businesses are consolidating, they're doing it for strategic reasons. And if the market, the overall trading card market, is making strategic decisions to consolidate and get more sophisticated, right? To advance the technologies, advance the go after a market in a different way, to, you know, bring things together to provide a suite of services that hasn't been available to the market. Like, there's a bunch of different positive things that could come from that consolidation. So I look at consolidation for the most part as a good thing. That means that smart people with money are making plays for the land grab that is the trading card marketplace. The trading card market has been a wild, wild west of joke companies for so long that I think anybody that's fearing the commoditization is somebody rooted too far into the hobby side of things and isn't necessarily seeing the full potential that these companies see by consolidating in methods that can get the masses involved. Because that the scale is the only thing that matters in this game. Everybody that's in the trading card business, from a production standpoint, from a selling, auctioning, etc., understands that there are so few people involved that if they can figure out a way to get more people involved, then that is what's going to drive the needle. Nothing else is going to move the needle. And so, with Fanatics, if you're on the production side, like Fanatics is, you need to listen to the hobby, because the hobby has the biggest voice in the room right now. And the more and more people that come on, I have to assume that anybody who's joining into the sports card world is going to have some sort of emotional attachment to the card. And if that's the case, I consider them part of the hobby, because they didn't buy the card and never saw the card and don't care about the card. And, like a fund investor that just dumps money in and hopes to get a paycheck back. I think that's going to be less so the case in these newcomers to the market. They're going to want to participate in it in some way. And so, the best interest of today's hobbyists, it's got to be in the minds of people like Fanatics to make sure they don't overproduce, make sure they don't drive dilute the market with crap. So I look at consolidation in a positive light. I think you do have to be a little concerned on the monopolization of things, just because competition breeds, new technology just breeds all kinds of great outcomes if you have competition. I think I love that Tag, from a grading company standpoint.
I like that too.
Tag has the best looking holder in the entire market. And they've been working on their tech for 10 years, whatever they said, but like they have the best looking holder. I don't know about their tech. Like it looks good, but I mean, who knows if it'll ever catch on. Maybe it'll get bought by PSA. Maybe it'll get bought by somebody else, but somebody's just come in and made a new holder and seemingly a good AI grading system that presents extremely well for a hobbyist. That's awesome. So we need that competition in the space. We don't want to just imagine the world is just PSA was the only grading company. Like that'd be shitty. But anyways, that's just grading side. I think the auction houses are competing with each other now too. And I maybe we see more consolidation in the auction house space, but I think right now it's great because you have so much competition. And I really hope that, I think one of the things, and this is kind of a tangent, but it's one of the things that really bothers me is the fee structure for the entire trading card space. If we want to get people, the masses, and this is just my personal opinion, you want the masses involved, go sell a share of Apple. How much did you get charged to sell a share of Apple or a share of Amazon?
Good point.
Now go and tell that same person, you're going to buy a card. You're going to lose 10% the moment you buy it. Then it's got to go up more than 10% because your fees, you know what I mean? So like you're in the hole, the fee structure, the moment you buy that card. So you better hope it goes up more than 10% or you're just breaking even, or you're losing money if it's not 10.
And then when you sell 20% on a buyer's premium, if you do an auction, well, obviously you could negotiate a little bit, but generally speaking,
you can usually get, and it's somewhere between, you're losing 10 to 20%. And that to me seems wrong. And I think the reason why the auction houses have kind of latched onto that is because in the current state, in the current population of the investor collector space is so small that they need to have that kind of percentage to pay for all of the labor and efforts that go into selling what they have. But if the scale goes up, 5x, 10x, whatever it may be, you've got to figure out a way to lower the fee structure. So, like Probstein right now has a 5% fee. Like where else can you sell? And I hate eBay. Like I hate eBay.
Bad. So bad.
They're like the unnecessary or the necessary evil right now, because there is a lot of flow that goes through eBay, but I wish they would be completely crushed by the current auction houses because their services are better, et cetera, et cetera. But right now you pay for those services. So a lot of people they'll say, oh, that's an eBay card. Like it's low dollar. It's not going to be contested. Just, it's not like close to a championship or someone's going to hold it and, play all those games. So sell it through eBay because you can get really low fees. So the fact that people have to learn that part of it, that's just another barrier to entry. You got to know how to sell your card, know how to buy your card, know where to buy your card. So, the stuff that we take for granted, it's like you could write a book
For sure.
and somebody would still have 15 questions at the end of reading it. And that is what prevents a lot of people from getting into our space.
For sure. This is a side question, but I actually, when you were mentioning it, I don't know, I kind of came up in my head. What percentage of purchases do you think like only really get done because they're on auction houses because they're strictly bought through credit, and as opposed to like actual cash private deals? You know what I mean?
You mean,
They're only like realistically the only reason these auctions are selling and these cards are selling and they're getting decent numbers on auction sites is because they are allowed to buy with credit, have a grace period, borrow against something to free up money or whatever the case may be, as opposed to I feel like, at least for myself personally, someone who sells pretty often, it's a lot harder to move cards on Instagram, especially higher dollar cards for strictly cash, because liquidity just isn't there as opposed to what it used to be.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a, I couldn't give you a percentage. I think there's a subset of, or a portion of the buying pool that is buying on credit, obviously. And I think a lot of that goes on through eBay. And I think when you get into the auction houses, the fees that you're charged and you see it more, you don't see it through eBay. The sellers have to eat all that. But when you're buying through some of the other auction houses where they charge you 3-4% or something when you're paying with a credit card, it doesn't happen as frequently. You'd rather trade in cards and consign in lieu of payment as opposed to use a credit card. It's not fun buying through a credit card. So yeah, I don't know.
Or
I
just like a
try to
30,
avoid.
30 day time to pay, I mean, that's
Oh
all
yeah,
to me, that's all terms of all forms of like credit or whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah, yeah. I
You don't need the
gotcha.
cash on hand. That's basically what I mean. But
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, and I think as I think we just need, the market needs more sophisticated buyers that have more buying power, that can really help make the entire market feel more legitimate. It's like a lot of people say, "Oh, vintage is safe." Well, why would vintage be safe versus, something like Griffey, right? So I'm not talking about like
Yeah.
modern rookies, like investing in a jaw RPA or something like that. But like, why has the 52 tops mantle essentially never gone down in value ever? It's literally just done this, and yeah, it spiked up in 2021 quite a bit, but it's just been doing, before that, it's just been doing like 5% per year, just kind of steadily going up. Um, and a lot of it is the demographic of who's buying that card. It's not
Collectability and pot and purchasing power. I think that's the
exactly.
combination.
Totally, totally. So, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with like Mike Trout cards, with like John Morant cards over the next 5 years as their careers start to develop and end. Will Mike Trout cards go up after he retires? Like, Derek Jeter cards after he left, what was it, 2014? I mean, that was well before the big boom, of course. But typically, like, retirement doesn't signal a big bump in card values, at least from what I've seen. And neither it does Hall of Fame inductions and these kind of like predictable things that flippers try to, pin on, like LeBron's points.
Yeah.
Some people are going to make money on that. Like, it just happens. Like, I remember in 2019, I think, or 2018 or 2019, Drew Brees was going to do the all-time passing record. And it was widely known that he was going to cross it. Like, you could almost predict exactly what game it was going to be. And you could have predicted it a year ago, but still people made a killing trying to flip Breeze cards the week before and after that event. And I think there's always going to be people doing that, but I think it takes the sophisticated long-term hold money that is basically you don't have to care about it every day in order for any of this to grow.
Yeah, I do agree with that 100%.
So
Any final? Yeah.
what cards or brands are you holding long term?
Oof, that's a good question. Um, I've got a couple things that I'm actually like thinking about in my head. I don't know if I necessarily want to like say it yet, but uh,
Divulge your secrets.
but yeah, I don't want to get I don't want to give people any ideas over here, but
But
nah,
what's one card that you foresee being in your PC, tomorrow and 5 years from now?
I mean, at one point I would like to get my hands on like a 71 Biz PSA 10. I think that'd be, I keep mentioning examples because I do like the card. I do, you know, I like where it could go, and
I think the PSA nines are going to go ROI better than the 10 from today.
agreed. But I think that the 10's safer. But I know what you're saying with the 9.
Not if you believe that the market is going to scale. If you believe that more entrants are going to come in, I think the smarter money is in the lower grades because they're more approachable.
My investments. So my future investment strategy is more so fund money, if you want to call it that. I look more towards the sophisticated money, and I don't see them going for a 9 when they see a 10. I just see the discrepancy between the highest tier
Yeah.
being far bigger than everything else. But I do think the 9s are cheap currently,
Yeah.
and they
I mean,
even
I'm
more.
most interested in seeing that if somebody could show me the data, not to like make money on it, but like I'm most interested to understand over the next 2 to 5 years if like what grades do better in terms of ROI. Because if the market really is going to scale, we know that, 99% of people coming into the market tomorrow are not going to go out and buy a $300,000 Lionel Messi card. One, because they're not really sold. They're sold maybe once a year. And then two, they probably don't have $300,000 they're going to drop on a single card, let alone the whole, portfolio of cards they want to buy. So if your average retail investor is coming in with 5 to 10K and they want to go have fun in cards and have this risky little side thing that they get to talk about at the cocktail party or whatever it is, then I think that saying that you have a well-balanced portfolio of a PSA 9 of that card and maybe a PSA 9 black refractor LeBron and like those cards, to me, I feel like, let me say it a different way. I feel like the growth of the hobby is going to be dependent on people's willingness to buy the card and not the grade. Not from like an eye appeal standpoint. I mean, that's a part of it, but just like, get comfortable buying, like get comfortable buying a PSA 9 because there's really not a lot that separates it other than population, but relatively like the population is crazy low. So like, it's like, imagine the PSA 9 mantle, or a PSA 7 mantle versus a PSA 8. Like, are you happy with a PSA 7 mantle? Hell yeah, you're happy with a
Sure.
7 mantle. Even though you don't have an 8, 9, or a 10, you're happy with that 7 mantle. Why? Because it's iconic. So I think there's your like the PSA mantle versus the Messi, similar population. Just if I did rough off the top of my head, I think the population is much higher in PSA for mantles than there are for Messi's in that grade or in that for
Yeah.
that card. So I see a defendable argument to buy a PSA 9 versus a 10. Now, if I sell my 10, I want you to buy it, but
Sure. Well, let me know. All right, but I'll counter you with that. I mean, what do you think a PSA 9 mantle is right now, based off the SGC 9.5?
whew, I don't know. I mean, if it depends on the centering. If it's really well centered, it's probably 10 million.
Okay, like 8 to 10 then? That's probably
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
What do you and then it was I remember right at the beginning, it was one sold for like 4, a really nice one. Rob G bought it or whatever.
Oh yeah, no, he got he got it for 6.
Oh,
I
was
think
it
it was 6
okay? All right, so that went
or
up like
5.6, 4 to 6. Yeah.
okay, yeah, gotcha. So I mean, roughly double, whatever. Um, Before this peak, what do you think? One didn't sell, but what do you think the PSA 10 was?
The PSA 10 mantle.
Yeah,
Oh man.
I was hearing rumors around like 10, 15,
Oh yeah, easily 10 to 15.
and
Easily.
and
Before like 2018, 10 to 15.
yeah, and
And
now what do you
now
think?
it's like 30, but people won't even sell it at 30.
Yeah,
There
because
have been
you
multiple
name you
offers at 30.
yeah, like it'd probably be liquid at 30 if someone was wanting to sell it. So I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting argument. Obviously, the
So
different card, different pop. Can't say
here,
one for one, but
here's what the market needs. The market needs to look at all of the data together. Like you need to look at population, you need to look at values, you need to combine it all together and form a cohesive picture of whatever what everything is. And then you need to teach the masses about why these things are special. I kind of use like the fine art example of Picasso. Like people know when 5th grade, when you're taught in like, your art class in 5th grade about the famous artists of whatever, Picasso coming out of elementary school. Like you don't know about, Ty Cobb or the T206 set, or why O3 Exquisite is like such a incredible set and historic set in the trading card hobby. Like you need to learn that stuff through trials and tribulations and gains and losses and talking to people like you that know so much already about everything. So it's like you need to really immerse yourself and spend a ton of time, whereas other things are it's easy for people to just put money into Masterworks because it's Picasso or it's Banksy, I heard about him on this or whatever. But for some reason for many good reasons, the trading card hobby is much more challenging to figure out.
for
And
sure.
because of that, you could spin it the positive way, because it's challenging because there's so many cool aspects to learn about. There's so much history, whether you're talking pre-war, whether you're talking about modern, there's just a lot of fun aspects for collectors to get passionate behind. And we see it all the time with the collector base right now. But I think
So
the
much
fun,
education.
yeah, the fun thing to do is like think about if you were sitting next to a stranger at a bar, how would you convince them to buy the card that you want to buy? How would you convince them? Like they don't know anything about the trading card market. So that is what the card market has to do in order to grow. They have to make that story compelling, easy to digest for the public. And that's what's really necessary.
Yeah, that's definitely a
Otherwise, we just have more years of flippers and FOMO and hype around players that are going to get injured, and then watching people put all their money into Zion and
bowl prism base, the
yeah,
classic. Yeah,
yeah,
it's brutal.
yeah,
But yeah, I think we'll probably end it there, Mike. I appreciate it. Definitely
yeah,
some
fun.
awesome words of wisdom, in it for a while into some deep levels. So thank you for being on and sharing with us.
Yeah, of course. I love talking about the hobby. It's fun.
Cool, cool, cool. Awesome. See you
All
guys
right,
later. Turn
take
off the
care.
recording. Yeah, man.